92% of people who set goals never achieve them. But here's what nobody tells you. The problem isn't laziness. It's that you've been trying to build discipline the wrong way your entire life. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's a version of you that exists in the future. 1 year from today, that version is either still starting Monday, still waiting for motivation, still promising to get serious next week, or that version has cracked the code. Calm, consistent, following through without the drama, without the guilt, without the endless self-negotiation. The difference between those two futures comes down to what you learn in the next 2 hours. And it starts with understanding that everything you've been told about discipline is fundamentally wrong. You've been lied to, not by bad people, not by people who wanted to mislead you, but by an entire culture that misunderstands how the human brain actually works. The lie goes something like this: discipline is a character trait. Some people have it, some people don't. And if you don't have it, you need to try harder. Push through. Force yourself. Summon willpower from somewhere deep inside and use it like a battering ram against your own resistance. This approach has a 95% failure rate, and yet we keep doing it. We keep white-knuckling our way through January gym sessions that disappear by February. We keep making promises on Sunday night that crumble by Wednesday afternoon. We keep telling ourselves that this time will be different, that we just need to want it more, that discipline is a matter of desire. Here's the truth that changes everything. Discipline is not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with or without. Discipline is installed software. It's a set of subconscious defaults that either work for you or against you. And just like any software, it can be reprogrammed. A 2019 study from the University of Southern California tracked over 400 people trying to build new habits. The researchers discovered something fascinating. The people who succeeded weren't the ones with the most willpower. They weren't the most motivated. They weren't the ones who tried hardest. The people who succeeded were the ones who designed their environment and their routines so that the right behavior required the least effort. Let that sink in. The winners didn't win by trying harder. They won by making the right choice the easy choice. They installed defaults. This is the fundamental shift that separates people who struggle with discipline their entire lives from people who seem to effortlessly follow through. Average performers try to force discipline from the top down. They rely on conscious effort, motivation, and willpower. Elite performers build discipline from the bottom up. They install subconscious systems that make the right behavior automatic. Think about your morning routine. When your alarm goes off, what happens? If you're like most people, there's a negotiation, a debate, a conversation between the part of you that wants to get up and the part of you that wants to hit snooze. That negotiation is exhausting. And by the time you've won it, you've already depleted some of the mental energy you need for the day. Now think about brushing your teeth. Is there a negotiation? Do you debate whether to brush? Do you need to summon motivation? Of course not. You just do it. It's automatic. It's a default. The difference isn't that brushing your teeth is easier than getting out of bed. The difference is that brushing your teeth has been installed as a subconscious program. Your brain doesn't process it as a decision. It processes it as just what happens next. This is what we're going to build for everything that matters to you. Exercise, focused work, healthy eating. Whatever you need to do consistently, we're going to turn it into teeth brushing. We're going to make it a default. But before we can install new software, we need to understand why the old approach keeps failing. We need to diagnose the problem accurately. Because if you misdiagnose why you're struggling with discipline, you'll keep applying the wrong solutions. Here's the pattern I see over and over again. Someone sets a goal. Let's say they want to work out 3 times a week. They feel motivated. They research gym memberships. They buy new shoes. They tell their friends. They start strong. Week 1 goes great. Week 2 is solid. Week 3, something happens. A busy day at work. A sick kid. A bad night of sleep. They miss a session. And here's where the real damage happens. They don't just miss the workout. They start a story. I knew I couldn't stick with this. I always do this. I'm just not a disciplined person. That story is more destructive than the missed workout. Because the story shapes identity. And identity shapes behavior. Once you've told yourself you're not a disciplined person, your brain starts looking for evidence to confirm that belief. Every small slip becomes proof. Every struggle becomes validation. You've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck spent 3 decades studying why some people persist through challenges while others give up. Her research revealed that the determining factor isn't talent or resources. It's the story people tell about themselves. People with a fixed mindset believe their qualities are carved in stone. People with a growth mindset believe they can develop any quality through effort and strategy. When it comes to discipline, most people operate from a fixed mindset without realizing it. They think discipline is something you either have or don't have. So when they fail, they conclude they don't have it. Game over. The first subconscious default we need to install is a different story. Not, I am a disciplined person. That's too big a leap and your brain will reject it. Instead, I am the type of person who is building discipline. That small shift changes everything. Because now every attempt, every struggle, every small win is evidence for the story instead of against it. Here's something that might surprise you. The most disciplined people you know don't feel more motivated than you do. They don't have more willpower. What they have is less friction between intention and action. They've designed their lives so that doing the right thing requires minimal conscious effort. Think about it this way. Imagine you want to read more books. The average approach is to tell yourself you should read more, feel guilty when you don't, and occasionally force yourself to pick up a book through sheer willpower. The elite approach is different. You put a book on your pillow every morning. You delete social media apps from your phone. You keep a book in your car, in your bag, next to the couch. You don't try to be disciplined. You make reading the path of least resistance. A 2021 study from MIT's Behavioral Science Lab found that environmental design is 3 times more effective than motivation-based strategies for behavior change. 3 times. That means the placement of a book on your pillow does more than all the motivational speeches you could ever watch. This is why the willpower approach keeps failing you. You're fighting against the grain of how your brain actually works. Your brain is designed to conserve energy. It's designed to take the path of least resistance. It's designed to automate repeated behaviors so they don't require conscious thought. When you try to force discipline through willpower, you're asking your brain to do something it's not designed to do. You're trying to swim upstream. And you can do it for a while, but eventually you get tired and the current carries you back. The approach we're going to use in this book works with your brain instead of against it. We're going to design your environment, your routines, and your identity so that the disciplined choice is the easy choice. We're going to install 7 subconscious defaults that automatically guide you toward the behavior you want. But here's what you need to understand before we go any further. This isn't about becoming a different person. This isn't about forcing yourself into some rigid, joyless existence where you white-knuckle your way through every day. This is about becoming more of who you already are. The you that knows what you should be doing. The you that sets those goals in the first place. The you that's listening to this audiobook right now because you're ready for something to actually work. That version of you isn't weak. That version of you isn't lazy. That version of you has just been using the wrong tools. You've been trying to build a house with a hammer when what you needed was a blueprint. Over the next 9 chapters, you're going to get that blueprint. You're going to learn exactly how your subconscious decides what to do and how to reprogram those decisions. You're going to discover why you procrastinate even when you don't want to, and how to stop. You're going to build a discipline architecture that works for work, fitness, relationships, personal projects, anything that matters to you. This system has nothing to do with motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes based on your sleep, your stress, your blood sugar, whether you had a good day or a bad day. You cannot build a consistent life on an inconsistent foundation. This system has nothing to do with willpower. Willpower is a limited resource. Every decision you make depletes it. By the end of a hard day, your willpower tank is empty. That's why you make your worst choices at night. That's why the diet fails after dinner. That's why the workout gets skipped after a stressful meeting. This system is built on defaults. Automatic patterns that run in the background. Programs that execute whether you feel like it or not. Because here's the secret that disciplined people know. They don't feel like doing it either. They've just made it so they don't have to feel like it. The behavior happens anyway. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the question isn't, should I work out today? The question is, which workout am I doing? Imagine sitting down at your desk, and the question isn't, can I focus? The question is, what am I focusing on first? Imagine reaching for your phone, and there's nothing there to distract you because you've designed the friction that way. That's not fantasy. That's architecture. And you're about to learn how to build it. The lie is that discipline is something you summon. The truth is that discipline is something you install. The lie is that you need more motivation. The truth is that you need better defaults. The lie is that some people are just built different. The truth is that anyone can build this. But there's a catch. You have to stop waiting. You have to stop telling yourself that you'll get serious on Monday. You have to stop believing that you need the perfect conditions, the perfect plan, the perfect moment. The perfect moment is a lie. The perfect moment is procrastination dressed up as prudence. The moment is now. The system starts in the next chapter. And by the time you finish this audiobook, you'll have a complete discipline architecture that you can use for the rest of your life. In the next chapter, you're going to learn exactly how your subconscious operating system works. You'll discover the four-part loop that controls almost everything you do. And once you understand this loop, you'll never look at your behavior the same way again. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. The Subconscious Operating System. Your brain makes approximately 35,000 decisions every day. But here's the part that changes everything. You're only aware of about 70 of them. The rest happen automatically, below the surface, without your conscious input. And those automatic decisions are running your life. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature. Your brain is the most sophisticated operating system on the planet. And like any good operating system, it pushes routine tasks into the background so you can focus on what matters. You don't consciously decide to breathe. You don't consciously decide to blink. You don't consciously decide to pull your hand away from a hot stove. These programs run automatically because they've been installed at the deepest level. But here's the problem. Your brain doesn't distinguish between good automatic programs and bad ones. It automates whatever you repeat. If you repeatedly scroll social media when you're bored, that becomes automatic. If you repeatedly hit snooze when the alarm goes off, that becomes automatic. If you repeatedly start on Monday and quit by Wednesday, guess what? That pattern becomes automatic too. This is why understanding your subconscious operating system isn't optional. It's essential, because right now, you have programs running that you didn't consciously choose. Programs that were installed by accident, by environment, by repetition. And those programs are determining your results more than any goal you've ever set. Let me show you exactly how this works. In 2012, researchers at Duke University conducted a landmark study on human behavior. They tracked hundreds of participants through their daily lives, cataloging every action and decision. What they found was startling. More than 40% of the actions people performed each day weren't actual decisions. They were habits, automatic responses to specific situations that required no conscious thought. 40%. Nearly half of everything you do today isn't really a choice. It's a program executing. This is why trying harder doesn't work. You can't try harder at something that isn't even reaching your conscious awareness. By the time you realize you've been scrolling for 20 minutes, the damage is done. By the time you notice you've been procrastinating, the morning is gone. The behavior happened automatically, and your conscious mind was just a passenger. So how does this automatic system actually work? There's a four-part loop that controls almost every habitual behavior. Understanding this loop is like getting the source code to your own brain. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you can unsee it, you can start rewriting it. The loop goes like this: cue, craving, response, reward. The cue is the trigger, something in your environment or your internal state that initiates the program. It could be a time of day. It could be a location. It could be an emotional state. It could be the presence of another person. The cue tells your brain, this is the situation, run the appropriate program. The craving is the motivational force. It's not the behavior itself that you crave, but the change in state that the behavior delivers. You don't crave scrolling Instagram. You crave the relief from boredom, the hit of novelty, the escape from whatever you were avoiding. The craving provides the energy for the behavior. The response is the actual behavior, the thing you do. This is the part that most people focus on, but it's actually the least important part for change. The response is just the output of the system. If you want to change the output, you have to change the inputs. The reward is the payoff. It's the result that satisfies the craving and teaches your brain whether this loop is worth repeating. Every time a behavior delivers a reward, the neural pathway gets a little stronger. The program gets a little more automatic. The habit gets a little more locked in. Here's a practical example. Let's say you have a pattern of procrastinating on important work by checking your phone. The cue might be sitting down at your desk and feeling the resistance of a difficult task. The craving isn't for your phone. The craving is for relief from that uncomfortable feeling of resistance. The response is picking up your phone and opening an app. The reward is the temporary escape, the dopamine hit, the feeling of relief. Your brain logs this loop. Resistance equals phone equals relief. And the next time you feel resistance, the loop runs faster. Eventually, you're reaching for your phone before you even consciously recognize you're avoiding something. The program is automatic. This is not a character flaw. This is your brain doing exactly what it's designed to do. It found a behavior that relieves discomfort, and it automated that behavior to save you cognitive effort. Your brain is trying to help you. It just doesn't know the difference between short-term relief and long-term success. And here's where the opportunity lives. The same mechanism that installed the procrastination loop can install a productivity loop. The same system that automated checking your phone can automate starting your most important work. The architecture is neutral. It runs whatever programs you install. Average performers fight against this system. They try to stop the bad behavior through willpower. They white-knuckle their way through the craving. They feel the pull of the phone and grit their teeth and resist. This works sometimes, but it's exhausting. And eventually, when willpower runs low, the old program runs again. Elite performers work with the system. They don't try to fight the loop. They redesign it. They change the cue so the old program doesn't trigger. They redirect the craving toward a different response. They engineer the reward so the new behavior gets reinforced. This is a fundamentally different approach. And it's why some people seem to have effortless discipline while others struggle forever. It's not that they have more willpower. It's that they've installed better programs. Let me give you a concrete example of how this redesign works. There's a software engineer I worked with who couldn't stop procrastinating on deep coding work. Every time he sat down to write code, within 10 minutes he was on Reddit or Twitter or some other distraction. He tried everything. Website blockers, willpower, accountability partners. Nothing worked for more than a few days. When we analyzed his habit loop, here's what we found. The cue was opening his laptop and seeing the browser icon. The craving was for stimulation because coding felt hard and uncertain. The response was clicking the browser and going to a familiar site. The reward was instant entertainment and escape from the discomfort of hard thinking. We didn't try to increase his willpower. We redesigned the loop. First, we changed the cue. He started working in a different physical location, a coffee shop instead of his home office. New environment, new associations. The old cue wasn't present. Second, we redirected the craving. He kept a notebook next to his laptop. When he felt the pull toward distraction, he wrote down what he was avoiding and why. This gave his brain something to do with the uncomfortable feeling instead of running to escape it. Third, we engineered the reward. He set a timer for 50 minutes. If he made it through without distraction, he got to check his sites guilt-free for 10 minutes. The reward was the same, but now it reinforced focus instead of procrastination. Within 3 weeks, his productivity tripled. Not because he became a different person, not because he found some hidden reserve of discipline, but because he rewired the loop. He installed a new program. This is what we're going to do across the next 7 chapters. We're going to systematically redesign your habit loops so that discipline becomes the default, not the exception. But there's something crucial you need to understand first. Your subconscious doesn't respond to logic. It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't care about your New Year's resolutions. It doesn't care that you know you should be doing something different. Your subconscious responds to 3 things: repetition, emotion, and environment. Repetition is how programs get installed. Every time a loop runs, it gets stronger. This is why bad habits are so hard to break. They've had thousands of repetitions. The neural pathway is a superhighway. And this is also why new habits feel so hard at first. They're fighting against established infrastructure. Emotion amplifies installation. A behavior performed with strong emotion gets installed faster and deeper than a behavior performed neutrally. This is why traumatic experiences create instant changes in behavior. The emotion supercharges the learning. And this is also why you need to attach emotion to your new defaults. We'll cover exactly how to do this. Environment provides the cues. Your subconscious is constantly scanning your surroundings for triggers. What you see, what you hear, what you feel, who you're with. All of these are potential cues that can launch programs. This is why changing your environment is often more powerful than changing your mind. New environment, new cues, new programs. Here's a study that demonstrates this perfectly. In 2005, researchers at Texas A&M tracked students who transferred to a new university. They found that transfer students were dramatically more successful at changing habits than students who stayed at the same school. Same people, same goals, same intentions. But the transfer students had a new environment, which meant their old cues weren't present. They didn't have to fight against established loops. They got to build new ones from scratch. This is one of the reasons why people often make big changes when they move to a new city, start a new job, or go through a major life transition. The environmental reset clears the cue landscape. Suddenly, automatic behaviors aren't being triggered because the triggers aren't there. You don't have to move to a new city to get this benefit, but you do have to take environment seriously. In the next chapter, we're going to dive deep into cue architecture, the first of your 7 subconscious defaults. You'll learn exactly how to design your physical and digital environment so that the cues around you trigger focus, productivity, and discipline instead of distraction, procrastination, and avoidance. But before we go there, I want to leave you with one more idea that will reshape how you think about this. You are not fighting yourself. This isn't a battle between your good side and your bad side, your disciplined self and your lazy self. There's no enemy here. There's just an operating system doing what operating systems do, running programs, seeking efficiency, responding to cues. When you understand this, something shifts. You stop feeling guilty about your struggles. You stop believing there's something wrong with you. You start seeing your behavior as output, as the result of a system that can be redesigned. The you that procrastinates isn't weak. That behavior is just a program running in response to a cue. The you that gets distracted isn't broken. That behavior is just a habit loop executing as designed. The you that starts Monday and quits by Wednesday isn't flawed. That pattern is just an installed default that hasn't been reprogrammed yet. And if it was programmed, it can be reprogrammed. That's what we're here to do. Across the next 8 chapters, you're going to install 7 subconscious defaults that will transform how you operate. Not through willpower, not through motivation, through systematic redesign of the programs running in the background of your life. In Chapter 3, we start with the first default, cue architecture. You'll learn exactly how to design your environment so that the right behaviors get triggered automatically. This is the foundation everything else builds on. The source code is open. Let's start rewriting it. Chapter 3, Cue Architecture. Google spent 2 years and millions of dollars trying to get their employees to eat healthier. They tried education. They tried incentives. They tried bringing in nutritionists to give seminars. Nothing worked. People kept reaching for the candy, the chips, the sodas. Then they tried something radically simple. They moved the candy from clear containers at eye level to opaque containers on lower shelves. They put water bottles at eye level in the refrigerators instead of sodas. They placed fruit near the checkout areas of their cafeterias. The result? Employees consumed 3 million fewer calories in just 7 weeks. 3 million calories. Not because anyone tried harder. Not because anyone learned something new. Not because anyone got more motivated. Simply because the environment changed. This is the power of cue architecture. And it's the first subconscious default you're going to install. Your environment is not neutral. Every object in your space, every app on your phone, every notification that pings, every item on your desk is either a cue that moves you toward your goals or a cue that moves you away from them. Most people never think about this. They let their environment happen to them. They wonder why they can't focus while sitting 3 feet from a television. They wonder why they keep checking social media while their phone sits face up on their desk, lighting up with every notification. Elite performers understand something different. They know that the environment always wins. In a battle between your intentions and your surroundings win every single time. So they don't fight the battle. They design the environment so there's no battle to fight. Here's the principle that changes everything. Every behavior has a cue, and every cue lives somewhere. If you control where the cues live, you control which behaviors get triggered. Let me show you how this works at a neurological level. Your brain has a structure called the basal ganglia. It's located deep in the center of your brain, and it's responsible for pattern recognition and automatic behaviors. When you walk into a room, your basal ganglia instantly scans the environment and matches what it sees against stored patterns. When it finds a match, it triggers the associated behavior. This happens in milliseconds, far below conscious awareness. This is why you can walk into your kitchen and find yourself opening the refrigerator without ever deciding to do so. The visual cue of the kitchen triggered the pattern. The behavior followed automatically. You didn't choose it. It was triggered. Now here's where this gets powerful. Your basal ganglia doesn't evaluate whether a behavior is good or bad. It just pattern matches and triggers. So if you've repeatedly checked your phone when you see it on your desk, that pattern is stored. And every time you see your phone on your desk, the urge to check it gets triggered automatically. You're not weak for feeling that urge. You're neurologically normal. The cue triggered the pattern. That's what brains do. But this also means you can reverse engineer the system. If seeing your phone triggers distraction, remove the phone from sight. If seeing the television triggers the urge to watch, put the remote in a drawer. If seeing junk food triggers eating, don't keep junk food visible. You're not relying on willpower to resist the cue. You're eliminating the cue entirely. A 2018 study published in the journal Psychological Science tested this exact principle. Researchers gave participants a task that required sustained focus. Half the participants had their phones on the desk, face down and silenced. The other half had their phones in another room entirely. Both groups were told to ignore their phones and focus on the task. The results were remarkable. The group with phones in another room significantly outperformed the group with phones on the desk, even though both phones were silenced. Even though both groups were trying equally hard to focus. The mere presence of the phone, even face down, was enough to drain cognitive resources. The researchers called this brain drain. Your brain expends energy resisting the cue even when you're not consciously aware of it. The phone on your desk is costing you focus whether you look at it or not. This is why cue architecture matters so much. It's not just about what triggers behavior. It's about what drains your mental resources. Every cue you have to resist is depleting the tank you need for actual work. So how do you actually redesign your cue landscape? There are 2 directions to work in: reducing cues for behaviors you want to stop and amplifying cues for behaviors you want to start. Let's start with reduction. Take an honest inventory of your environment. Walk through your home, your office, your digital spaces. For each area, ask yourself, what behaviors get triggered here? What do I automatically do when I'm in this space? What objects or notifications pull my attention without my permission? Be specific. Don't just say, my phone is distracting. Identify exactly which apps, which notifications, which visual elements trigger the behavior. Is it the red notification badge? Is it the position of certain apps on your home screen? Is it the sound of the notification tone? Once you've identified the cues, you have 3 options. Remove them completely. Hide them so they're not visible. Or add friction so they're harder to access. Removing is most effective. If the cue isn't there, it can't trigger. Delete the apps that consistently pull you into distraction spirals. Unsubscribe from the emails that derail your mornings. Get the junk food out of your house entirely. This sounds extreme, but it's actually the easiest path. You make one decision, and then you never have to make it again. Hiding works when removal isn't possible. Put your phone in a drawer during focus time. Use website blockers that hide distracting sites. Rearrange your apps so the problematic ones aren't on your home screen. The goal is to break the visual trigger. If your basal ganglia doesn't see the cue, it doesn't trigger the pattern. Adding friction works when hiding isn't enough. Make the behavior harder to perform. Log out of social media accounts so you have to log in each time. Put your phone in another room so you have to physically get up to check it. Use apps that require you to wait 30 seconds before opening distracting sites. Every bit of friction is a decision point, and decision points give your conscious mind a chance to intervene. Average performers try to resist cues through willpower. They leave their phone on the desk and try not to look at it. They keep the cookies in the pantry and try not to eat them. They have Netflix one click away and try not to open it. This is exhausting. It drains cognitive resources, and it fails reliably when willpower runs low. Elite performers eliminate the contest entirely. They design their environment so the wrong behavior isn't cued in the first place. No cue, no trigger. No trigger, no behavior. No behavior, no willpower required. Now let's talk about the other direction. Amplifying cues for behaviors you want. The same principle works in reverse. If you want to read more, put books everywhere. On your nightstand, on the kitchen table, on the couch, in your bag. Every time your brain scans the environment, it should encounter the cue for reading. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. Put them right next to your bed so they're the first thing you see. Put your running shoes by the door. Make the gym bag visible. Stack the cues so that exercising is the path of least resistance. If you want to do focused work first thing in the morning, set up your workspace the night before. Open the document you need to work on. Close all other tabs. Put your phone in another room before you go to sleep. When you sit down in the morning, the only cue present is the cue for work. Here's a specific technique that works incredibly well. It's called cue stacking, and it's based on research from Stanford's Behavior Design Lab. The idea is to attach new behaviors to existing cues that already trigger reliable actions. You already have dozens of automatic behaviors. You brush your teeth. You make coffee. You sit in your car. You open your laptop. These behaviors happen consistently, which means the cues for them are powerful and reliable. Cue stacking attaches a new behavior to an existing cue. The formula is simple. After I do current behavior, I will do new behavior. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write in my journal for 5 minutes. After I sit down at my desk, I will identify my most important task. After I brush my teeth at night, I will read for 10 minutes. After I close my laptop at the end of the workday, I will do a 5-minute review. The existing behavior becomes the cue for the new behavior. You're hijacking a neural pathway that already exists instead of trying to build one from scratch. This is dramatically more effective than trying to remember to do something new at a random time. There's one more principle of cue architecture that most people miss. It's not just about individual cues. It's about creating what I call dedicated activation spaces. Your brain is highly contextual. It associates locations with behaviors. This is why you might feel sleepy when you get into bed, even if you weren't tired a moment ago. The location itself is a cue that triggers the associated state. You can use this to your advantage by dedicating specific spaces to specific activities. If possible, have a place where you only do focused work. When your brain learns that this location equals deep focus, entering that space will automatically shift your mental state. This is why working from your bed is such a problem. Your bed is cued for sleep and relaxation. When you try to work there, you're fighting against the contextual associations your brain has already built. If you don't have the luxury of multiple spaces, you can create symbolic cues that establish context. Some people use a specific lamp that they only turn on during focus time. Some people wear a particular hat or use specific headphones that signal work mode. The object becomes the cue that establishes the context. A 2020 study from the University of Tokyo found that participants who used consistent environmental cues for focus outperformed those who worked in variable conditions by over 40%. Same tasks, same time investment. But the consistent environmental cues created stronger neural associations, which made getting into the work state faster and more automatic. Here's your action step for cue architecture. Tonight, do an environment audit. Walk through every space where you spend significant time. Identify the cues that are triggering behaviors you don't want. Identify the cues that should be present for behaviors you do want. Make 3 physical changes before you go to sleep. Remove 1 negative cue completely. Hide or add friction to 1 more. And place 1 positive cue somewhere prominent. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. 3 changes tonight. 3 more next week. Incremental redesign is sustainable. Overnight revolution usually isn't. Your environment is either working for you or against you. There's no neutral. Every object is a cue. Every cue triggers something. The question is whether you've consciously designed those triggers or whether you've let them happen by accident. In the next chapter, we're going to install your second subconscious default, identity lock. Because even in a perfectly designed environment, there's a deeper layer that determines your behavior. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are. And that story is about to change. Let's keep building. Chapter 4, Identity Lock. In 1954, a social psychologist named Leon Festinger infiltrated a doomsday cult. The group believed the world would end on December 21st, and a flying saucer would arrive to save the true believers. Festinger wanted to study what would happen when the prophecy failed. Would the members admit they were wrong and leave? The opposite happened. When December 21st passed and no saucer appeared, the cult members didn't abandon their beliefs. They doubled down. They became more committed, more vocal, more convinced than ever. They started actively recruiting new members for the first time. Festinger's explanation for this seemingly irrational behavior became one of the most important discoveries in psychology. He called it cognitive dissonance. When your actions conflict with your identity, your brain experiences psychological discomfort. And to resolve that discomfort, your brain will change either the behavior or the belief. The cult members had invested so much of their identity into the belief that changing it was psychologically impossible. So they changed their interpretation of reality instead. This discovery reveals something crucial about how discipline actually works. Your behavior doesn't flow from your goals. It flows from your identity. You don't rise to the level of your aspirations. You fall to the level of your self-image. And until you change who you believe you are, no amount of tactics or strategies will create lasting change. This is the second subconscious default, identity lock. And it's the most powerful lever you have for permanent behavior change. Here's why identity trumps everything else. When you set a goal, you're essentially saying, I want this outcome. That's external. It's something you're trying to get. But when you shift your identity, you're saying, I am this person. That's internal. It's something you're trying to be. And your brain treats these two statements very differently. Goals create tension. There's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap generates motivation initially, but it also generates stress. And when the stress exceeds the motivation, you quit. This is why most goals fail. The psychological cost of maintaining the gap eventually becomes too high. Identity creates consistency. When you believe you are a certain type of person, your brain works to maintain that self-image. Behaving against your identity creates cognitive dissonance, which is deeply uncomfortable. So you naturally behave in ways that confirm who you believe you are. There's no gap to maintain. There's no tension to manage. The behavior flows from the identity automatically. A 2016 study from the University of Pennsylvania demonstrated this perfectly. Researchers divided participants into 2 groups and asked them to vote. One group was asked, how important is it to you to vote? The other group was asked, how important is it to you to be a voter? Just that small change in wording from action to identity increased actual voter turnout by 15%. 15% from changing a single word. This is the shift we need to make with discipline. Not, I want to be disciplined. That's a goal. Instead, I am the type of person who follows through. That's an identity. But here's where most people get stuck. They hear this advice and they try to just adopt a new identity instantly. They look in the mirror and say, I am disciplined, when every piece of evidence in their life says otherwise. Their brain rejects it. It feels fake, and nothing changes. The reason is that identity isn't built by declaration. Identity is built by evidence. Your self-image is essentially a collection of beliefs about yourself, and those beliefs are formed by proof. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are. Take enough votes in one direction, and your brain updates its model of who you are. This is the mechanism we're going to leverage. We're not going to try to believe something new through sheer force of will. We're going to systematically generate evidence until the new belief becomes undeniable. I call this process identity lock, and it works in 3 stages. Stage 1 is the identity statement. You define, in specific terms, who you are becoming. Not who you want to be someday. Who you are right now, in the process of becoming. The formula is, I am the type of person who. I am the type of person who shows up even when I don't feel like it. I am the type of person who does the hard thing first. I am the type of person who finishes what I start. I am the type of person who keeps promises to myself. Notice these statements aren't about outcomes. They're about character. They describe how you operate, not what you achieve. This is important because outcomes are often outside your control, but your operating patterns are always within your control. Choose one statement that captures the disciplined identity you're building. Write it down. This is your target identity. Everything else we do is about generating evidence for this statement. Stage 2 is the proof loop. This is where you systematically create daily evidence that supports your identity statement. The key insight here is that the size of the action doesn't matter. What matters is the consistency and the interpretation. Your brain doesn't weigh evidence by magnitude. It weighs evidence by frequency. One massive action doesn't update your identity as much as dozens of tiny actions repeated over time. This is counterintuitive. Most people think they need to do something big to prove they're disciplined. They think they need to wake up at 5 a.m. and work out for an hour and meditate and journal and eat perfectly and be productive all day. And when they can't sustain that, they conclude they're not disciplined. Elite performers understand that identity is built by repetition, not intensity. They focus on tiny daily proofs that they can execute consistently. A 5-minute workout counts. A single paragraph written counts. One healthy meal counts. Each small action is a vote, and votes accumulate. Here's a practical technique for building your proof loop. Each morning, identify one small action that proves your identity statement. It should take less than 5 minutes. It should be so easy that you could do it even on your worst day. This is your daily proof. If your identity statement is, I am the type of person who does the hard thing first, your daily proof might be, before I check email, I will spend 2 minutes on my most important task. Just 2 minutes. That's it. But those 2 minutes, executed consistently, accumulate into undeniable evidence. If your identity statement is, I am the type of person who takes care of my body, your daily proof might be, I will do 5 push-ups before my morning shower. 5 push-ups takes 30 seconds. But 30 days of 5 push-ups is 150 push-ups and 30 pieces of evidence that you are the type of person who exercises. The proof loop has one more component that most people miss. It's not enough to do the action. You have to consciously register it as evidence. After completing your daily proof, take 3 seconds to mentally note, this is who I am. This is another vote for my identity. This conscious registration is crucial. Without it, the action slips into the background. Your brain doesn't flag it as significant. But when you explicitly frame each action as evidence for your identity, you're telling your brain, pay attention, this matters, update the model. A 2019 study from Northwestern University found that people who explicitly connected their behaviors to their identity were 3 times more likely to maintain those behaviors over a 6-month period. 3 times. Same behaviors. Same difficulty. But the identity framing created dramatically different outcomes. Stage 3 is the lock mechanism. This is where the identity becomes self-reinforcing and starts to feel automatic. Here's how the lock works. As evidence accumulates, your brain's model of who you are begins to shift. At first, the new identity feels like a stretch. You're acting disciplined, but you don't quite feel disciplined. There's a gap between behavior and belief. But as the daily proofs stack up, something changes. The evidence becomes overwhelming. Your brain can no longer maintain the old self-image in the face of contradictory data. The cognitive dissonance flips. Now it feels uncomfortable to be undisciplined because it conflicts with who you've proven yourself to be. This is the lock. Once your identity updates, discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. You don't have to motivate yourself to act consistently, because acting inconsistently would create psychological discomfort. Average performers try to change their behavior directly. They set goals, make plans, and use willpower to force themselves into action. When the willpower runs out, they default back to their old identity, which drives their old behavior. Elite performers change their identity first. They define who they're becoming, generate daily evidence, and let the behavior flow naturally from the updated self-image. The behavior is sustainable because it's supported by identity instead of opposed by it. There's one more piece to identity lock that makes it even more powerful. It's called identity-based language, and it affects how you talk about yourself in everyday situations. Notice how you describe yourself to others and in your own internal monologue. Most people use language that reinforces their current limitations. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I'm a procrastinator. I'm just not disciplined. Every time you say these things, you're casting a vote. You're providing evidence to your brain that this is who you are. And your brain, always seeking consistency, generates behavior that matches the statement. Starting today, eliminate identity statements that conflict with who you're becoming. You're not a morning person. You're someone who is learning to use mornings effectively. You're not a procrastinator. You're someone who is building systems to start faster. The language shift might feel awkward at first, but language shapes thought, and thought shapes identity. When someone asks why you're not eating the cake, don't say, I can't. I'm on a diet. Say, I don't eat that. I'm someone who fuels my body well. The first statement implies restriction and willpower. The second statement implies identity. Research from the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that people who used I don't language were significantly more successful at resisting temptation than those who used I can't language. Same situation, different framing, different results. Here's your action step for identity lock. Right now, complete this sentence. I am the type of person who. Choose one statement that captures the disciplined identity you want to build. Then identify your daily proof. What small action, under 5 minutes, will you execute every single day to generate evidence for this identity? Start tomorrow. Register each completion consciously. Stack the votes. The person you become is the person you prove yourself to be, and you prove it one small action at a time. In the next chapter, we're going to install your third subconscious default, friction design. You've designed your cues. You've defined your identity. Now we're going to engineer the paths of resistance so that the disciplined choice becomes literally easier than the undisciplined one. This is where the system starts to feel automatic. Chapter 5, Friction Design. Amazon once calculated that every 100 milliseconds of delay in their page load time cost them 1% of sales. 100 milliseconds. That's faster than a blink. Faster than conscious perception. And it was enough to change behavior at a scale of billions of dollars. This is friction, and it's running your life whether you realize it or not. Every behavior has a friction cost. The number of steps required, the amount of effort involved, the mental load of deciding and initiating. These costs are often tiny, almost imperceptible, but your brain perceives them with extraordinary precision. And when given a choice between two options, your brain will almost always choose the path with less friction. This is why you check social media instead of starting deep work. It's not that you prefer scrolling to meaningful progress. It's that scrolling requires one tap, while deep work requires finding the right file, remembering where you left off, gathering your focus, and pushing through initial resistance. The friction cost of deep work is higher, so your brain defaults to the lower friction option. The good news is that friction works in both directions. You can use it against yourself, or you can use it for yourself. And once you understand how to engineer friction deliberately, you gain control over your default behaviors in ways that feel almost unfair. This is your third subconscious default, friction design. And it's the closest thing to a cheat code for discipline that exists. Here's the core principle. You don't need more willpower to do hard things. You need to make hard things easier. And you don't need more self-control to avoid bad behaviors. You need to make bad behaviors harder. The goal is to tilt the playing field so that the right choice requires less effort than the wrong choice. Let me show you how dramatically small friction changes can alter behavior. In 2010, Google's behavioral science team ran an experiment in their New York office. They wanted to reduce how much candy employees were eating from the snack stations. Instead of removing the candy or lecturing employees about health, they simply moved the candy 6 feet away from where people naturally walked. Just 6 feet. Not to another floor. Not to a locked cabinet. 6 feet. Candy consumption dropped by nearly 30%. The tiny increase in friction, having to take a few extra steps, was enough to disrupt the automatic behavior. People weren't consciously deciding to eat less candy. They were just responding to the friction change without realizing it. Now flip that principle. In the same experiment, researchers moved the water cooler closer to the main walkway. Water consumption increased by 47%. Same mechanism. Lower friction, higher behavior. This is the leverage point most people miss entirely. They try to change their desires. They try to want the right things more and the wrong things less. But desire is hard to change directly. Friction is easy to change. And friction shapes behavior just as powerfully as desire does, often more so. Let's break down exactly how to engineer friction for your advantage. There are 2 types of friction to design: barrier friction for behaviors you want to reduce, and runway friction for behaviors you want to increase. Barrier friction is about adding obstacles to unwanted behaviors. Every obstacle you add creates a decision point, and every decision point gives your conscious mind a chance to intervene before the automatic behavior executes. Here's a practical example. Let's say you waste too much time on YouTube. The automatic behavior goes like this. You feel a moment of boredom or resistance. You pick up your phone. You tap the app. You're watching videos. The whole sequence takes about 3 seconds. There are no friction points to interrupt it. Now let's add barrier friction. First, delete the YouTube app from your phone. If you want to watch YouTube, you have to open a browser and navigate to the site. That's 2 extra steps. Second, log out of your account on the browser. Now you have to log in if you want your personalized feed. Third, use a browser extension that requires you to wait 10 seconds before the site loads. Fourth, keep your phone in another room while you work. Each individual barrier is small. None of them make YouTube impossible to access. But stacked together, they transform a 3-second automatic behavior into a 30-second conscious decision. And in those 30 seconds, you have multiple opportunities to ask yourself, do I actually want to do this right now, or am I just avoiding something? Most people dramatically underestimate how much small barriers affect behavior. A 2017 study from the University of Chicago found that adding just 2 extra clicks to an online checkout process reduced completed purchases by 14%. 2 clicks. This is why Amazon patented one-click buying. They understand that friction matters at the margin. Average performers rely on willpower to resist temptation. They keep the cookies in the pantry and try not to eat them. They keep the apps on their phone and try not to open them. They keep the television visible and try not to watch. This is exhausting because every exposure to the cue triggers the craving, and resisting the craving costs mental energy. Elite performers build barriers that make the temptation hard to act on. They don't buy the cookies in the first place. They delete the apps entirely. They unplug the television and put the remote in a closet. They're not resisting temptation. They're engineering an environment where the temptation can't easily convert to behavior. Here's a specific barrier friction technique that works remarkably well. It's called the 20-second rule. If you can increase the time it takes to start an unwanted behavior by 20 seconds, you'll dramatically reduce how often you do it. 20 seconds doesn't sound like much, but your brain is constantly doing friction calculations. When the equation changes, behavior changes. Want to stop watching television in the evenings? Take the batteries out of the remote and put them in another room. It only adds 20 seconds to the process, but that's enough to break the automaticity. Now let's talk about the opposite direction, runway friction. This is about removing obstacles from desired behaviors so they happen almost automatically. The same 20-second rule works in reverse. If you can reduce the time it takes to start a wanted behavior by 20 seconds, you'll dramatically increase how often you do it. Want to exercise in the morning? Sleep in your workout clothes. Put your shoes right next to the bed. Have the exercise app already open on your phone. Remove every possible step between waking up and starting the workout. The goal is to make starting require less than 20 seconds of activation energy. Want to eat healthier? Prep your meals on Sunday, so healthy eating during the week requires zero friction. Cut up vegetables and put them at eye level in the fridge. Put the fruit on the counter where you'll see it. Make the healthy choice the easiest choice. Want to do focused work first thing in the morning? Set up your workspace the night before. Have the document open. Have the browser tabs closed. Have the phone in another room. When you sit down, the only thing in front of you is the work. Zero friction. A 2014 study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology tracked how long it took people to form automatic habits. They found that the average was 66 days, but the range was enormous, from 18 days to 254 days. The biggest predictor of faster habit formation wasn't motivation or personality. It was friction. People who designed low-friction environments formed habits dramatically faster than people who didn't. Here's a framework I call the friction audit. Once a week, ideally Sunday evening, review your key behaviors from the past week. For each behavior you want to do more of, ask, what friction is preventing me from starting faster? Remove one obstacle. For each behavior you want to do less of, ask, what friction could I add to make this harder? Add one barrier. Small weekly adjustments compound over time. You don't need to redesign your entire life at once. You need to incrementally tilt the playing field in your favor. Let me give you a specific example of how friction design works across a full day. Morning, you want to meditate, but you keep skipping it. Current friction, you have to find a quiet spot, open an app, choose a session, and start. New design, you leave a meditation cushion in the same spot every night. The app is already open on your phone set to a 5-minute session. Your phone is on the cushion, so you have to pick it up anyway. Starting meditation now requires picking up the phone and pressing play. Work, you want to focus, but you keep getting distracted by email. Current friction, email is one tab away, open all day, with notifications on. New design, you close the email tab during focus blocks. Notifications are off. You've told colleagues you check email at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Checking email now requires reopening the tab, which creates a decision point. Evening, you want to read, but you keep watching television instead. Current friction, the TV is on, remote is on the couch, your book is in another room. New design, you unplug the TV after each use. The remote goes in a drawer. Your book is on the couch where you sit. Reading is now the path of least resistance. Each of these changes is small. None of them require superhuman discipline. But stacked together, they transform your default behaviors from fighting against your goals to flowing toward them. There's one more dimension of friction design that's particularly powerful. It's called commitment devices, and it involves deliberately creating friction that's hard to undo. The classical example is Odysseus and the Sirens. Knowing he would be tempted by their song, Odysseus had his crew tie him to the mast before they sailed past. He didn't trust his future self to resist. So his present self created a barrier that his future self couldn't easily remove. You can do the same thing. Want to stop spending money on impulse purchases? Freeze your credit card in a block of ice. You can still access it if you really need to, but the friction of waiting for it to thaw eliminates impulse decisions. Want to guarantee you wake up early? Put your alarm across the room so you have to physically get up to turn it off. Some people go further and use apps that require solving math problems to silence the alarm. The friction makes falling back asleep harder than just getting up. Want to ensure you finish a project? Tell someone you respect that you'll pay them $500 if you don't complete it by the deadline. The financial friction of failure creates a commitment that your future self can't easily escape. Commitment devices work because they remove the decision from the moment of temptation. You make the choice when you're thinking clearly, and then you bind your future self to that choice through friction. Your assignment for this chapter is to identify your highest impact friction opportunity. What's one behavior you want to do more that you could reduce friction for? What's one behavior you want to do less that you could add friction to? Make the physical changes tonight. Don't just plan them. Actually move objects, delete apps, change your environment right now. Remember, willpower is a battle you fight every day. Friction design is a battle you win once. In the next chapter, we're going to tackle something that undermines discipline more than almost anything else: your dopamine system. You'll learn exactly why your brain craves distraction, why cheap rewards sabotage long-term goals, and how to redesign your dopamine budget so that discipline becomes pleasurable instead of painful. This is where neuroscience meets practical strategy. Chapter 6: Dopamine Budget. A neuroscientist at Stanford named Anna Lemke spent 2 decades studying addiction. Not just drug addiction, all addiction. And she discovered something that explains why you can't focus, why you keep procrastinating, and why discipline feels so impossibly hard in the modern world. The average person in 1990 encountered about 2,000 advertisements per day. Today that number is over 10,000. The average person in 1990 had access to a few dozen television channels. Today you have unlimited streaming content, infinite social media feeds, and a supercomputer in your pocket delivering novel stimulation every few seconds. Your great-grandparents lived in a world of dopamine scarcity. You live in a world of dopamine abundance. And your brain was never designed for this. This is why discipline has become so difficult. Not because you're weaker than previous generations, but because you're fighting against an environment engineered by billions of dollars of research to hijack your neurochemistry. Every app on your phone, every platform you use, every piece of content you consume has been optimized to trigger dopamine release in your brain. And that constant bombardment is destroying your capacity for sustained effort. This is the fourth subconscious default: dopamine budget. And understanding it will explain why everything else you've tried has failed. Let's start with what dopamine actually does, because most people get this wrong. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. That's a myth that's been repeated so often it feels like fact. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It's the motivation chemical. It's released not when you experience something rewarding, but when you expect something rewarding. Dopamine is what makes you want, not what makes you like. This distinction matters enormously. When your phone buzzes, dopamine spikes. Not because the notification is pleasurable, but because your brain anticipates something might be there. When you open social media, dopamine spikes. Not because scrolling feels good, but because your brain anticipates something interesting on the next scroll. The anticipation drives the behavior, not the satisfaction. Here's where it gets problematic. Your brain has a dopamine baseline, a resting level of dopamine that determines your motivation and mood. When you experience something that spikes dopamine, it doesn't just add to your baseline. It borrows from it. After the spike comes a dip. The higher the spike, the lower the subsequent dip. And if you spike dopamine repeatedly throughout the day, your baseline drops lower and lower. This is why checking social media makes it harder to focus on work. This is why watching highly stimulating content makes ordinary life feel boring. This is why constant access to cheap rewards makes sustained effort feel unbearable. You're not lazy. Your dopamine system is dysregulated. A 2021 study from the University of California tracked participants' dopamine responses over a 4-week period. They found that participants who engaged in high dopamine activities, such as social media, video games, and highly processed foods, showed progressively decreasing dopamine responses to normal activities. Their baseline had dropped. Things that should have felt motivating, like meaningful work, exercise, and real social connection, felt flat and unrewarding. This is dopamine tolerance, the same mechanism that makes drug addicts need higher doses to feel the same effect. You've been microdosing stimulation all day, every day, for years. And now your brain requires more and more stimulation to feel anything at all. Average performers live in dopamine debt. They start the day by checking their phone, spiking dopamine before they've done anything productive. They take breaks by scrolling social media, spiking dopamine instead of actually resting. They end the day with streaming content, spiking dopamine right before sleep. Their baseline is perpetually suppressed. And then they wonder why they can't motivate themselves to do hard things. Elite performers manage their dopamine like a budget. They understand that dopamine is a finite resource. They're strategic about when they spike it and when they let it rest. They front-load the day with low dopamine activities, saving higher dopamine rewards for later. They create dopamine deficits deliberately so that ordinary tasks become more rewarding. This is the core concept, dopamine budget. You have a limited amount of motivational currency each day. Every cheap spike costs something. And if you spend it all on garbage, you have nothing left for what matters. Let me show you exactly how to manage this. The first principle is dopamine fasting in the morning. The first 2 hours after waking are critical. This is when your dopamine system is resetting and your baseline is establishing for the day. What you do in these hours determines how motivated you'll feel for everything that follows. If you check your phone immediately upon waking, you spike dopamine with novel stimulation before you've done anything productive. Your brain learns that cheap rewards are easy to get. Your baseline drops. And now the work you need to do has to compete with the high dopamine activities you've already experienced. Instead, protect the first 90 minutes of your day from all high dopamine input. No phone, no email, no social media, no news. Let your dopamine system wake up naturally. Let the baseline establish without artificial spikes. Then direct that clean motivation toward your most important work. Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman recommends delaying caffeine for 90 to 120 minutes after waking for similar reasons. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, which indirectly affects dopamine signaling. When you drink coffee immediately upon waking, you interfere with your brain's natural wake-up process and create an artificial spike followed by a crash. The second principle is categorizing your rewards into cheap and deep. Cheap dopamine comes from activities that deliver immediate stimulation with no effort required. Social media, clickbait content, highly processed foods, video games, pornography. These activities spike dopamine quickly and dramatically, but they deliver no lasting value, and they leave you in a deficit afterward. Deep dopamine comes from activities that require effort but deliver genuine satisfaction. Completing meaningful work, physical exercise, real social connection, learning something new, creating something. These activities spike dopamine more gradually, but they don't create the same crash. They leave you feeling fulfilled rather than depleted. The goal isn't to eliminate all pleasure from your life. The goal is to shift your dopamine consumption from cheap to deep. To get your spikes from sources that actually improve your life rather than sources that leave you empty and wanting more. Here's a practical technique. Create a reward schedule that front-loads effort and backloads reward. Do your most challenging work in the morning when your dopamine baseline is highest. Save higher dopamine activities for the evening as a reward for productive effort. This inverts the typical pattern where people take dopamine hits all day and try to do hard work with a depleted system. The third principle is creating strategic dopamine deficits. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you want less dopamine? But here's what happens when you deliberately abstain from high dopamine activities for a period of time. Your baseline rises. Your receptors upregulate. Things that seemed boring start to feel interesting again. Work that felt impossible starts to feel manageable. You're essentially resetting your sensitivity. A 2022 study published in Nature Neuroscience examined participants who abstained from their primary dopamine sources for 30 days. Brain imaging showed significant increases in dopamine receptor density and baseline dopamine levels. The participants reported that ordinary activities felt more rewarding. Colors seemed brighter. Conversations felt more engaging. Work felt more satisfying. They had reset their hedonic set point. You don't need to do a 30-day dopamine detox to benefit from this. Even small deficits help. 1 day per week with no social media. 1 evening per week with no screens. 1 morning per week with no stimulation at all. These periodic deficits allow your system to recalibrate. The fourth principle is pairing effort with reward correctly. Your brain is constantly learning associations. When you complete a difficult task and immediately follow it with a reward, your brain links the two. The next time you face a difficult task, some of the anticipated reward pulls you forward. But most people get the pairing wrong. They reward themselves before they've done the work. They take a social media break when they feel resistance. They watch an episode before they finish the project. This teaches the brain that resistance leads to reward. You're reinforcing avoidance, not effort. Flip the pairing. Make the rule absolute. High dopamine rewards come only after meaningful work. Not during, not before, after. When you do this consistently, your brain learns a new association. Effort leads to reward. The anticipation of the reward, which is dopamine, starts to attach to the effort itself. Work becomes more motivating because it's linked to something your brain wants. Here's a specific technique called temptation bundling, developed by behavioral economist Catherine Milkman at Wharton. The idea is to pair something you need to do with something you want to do. You can only listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. You can only watch your favorite show while folding laundry. You can only check social media after completing your daily writing. The want activity becomes the reward for the need activity. And over time, the need activity starts to inherit some of the motivational pull of the want activity. There's one more piece to dopamine management that most people miss entirely. It's about how you frame your efforts cognitively. Research from Stanford shows that the way you think about effort affects your dopamine response to it. If you frame effort as suffering to be endured, your brain generates less dopamine during the activity. But if you frame effort as progress towards something meaningful, your brain generates more dopamine. This is why identity matters so much. When you see effort as evidence of who you are, as proof that you're the type of person who follows through, the effort itself becomes rewarding. You're not just enduring the work. You're collecting evidence. You're building something. And that frame changes the neurochemistry. Your assignment for this chapter is to audit your dopamine sources. List every activity that gives you a significant dopamine hit. Categorize each as cheap or deep. Then design one change that reduces your cheap dopamine intake and one change that protects your morning baseline. Start tomorrow. The goal is simple. Stop borrowing motivation from your future self. Build a dopamine budget that funds the life you actually want. In the next chapter, we're going to address something that sabotages discipline more than almost any other factor: your nervous system's threat response. You'll learn why your body sometimes refuses to start important work, why procrastination is often a fear response in disguise, and how a 2-minute reset can shift you from avoidance to action. This is where biology meets breakthrough. Chapter 7: Nervous System Reset. In 1994, a neuroscientist named Stephen Porges was studying heart rate patterns in newborn babies when he discovered something that would revolutionize our understanding of human behavior. He noticed that the baby's heart rates weren't just responding to external stimuli. They were fluctuating in complex patterns that seemed to reflect internal states of safety or threat. This observation led him to develop what he called polyvagal theory, and it explains why you procrastinate even when you desperately want to take action. Here's what Porges discovered. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for danger. Not just physical danger, social danger, emotional danger, any situation that your brain interprets as potentially threatening. And when your nervous system detects a threat, it shifts into a protective state that makes focused, disciplined action nearly impossible. This is why you can sit at your desk, knowing exactly what you need to do, wanting to do it, and still find yourself unable to start. Your conscious mind says work. Your nervous system says threat. And in that battle, your nervous system wins every single time. Most productivity advice completely ignores this. It treats procrastination as a thinking problem, a planning problem, a motivation problem. But for most people, procrastination is a nervous system problem. Your body is in a threat state, and your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do in threat states: avoid, escape, freeze. This is the fifth subconscious default, nervous system reset, and it's the missing piece that makes everything else work. Let me explain exactly what's happening in your body when you procrastinate. Your autonomic nervous system has 3 primary states. The first is the ventral vagal state, which is your safe and social mode. In this state, you feel calm, connected, and capable. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, focus, and execution, is fully online. This is where discipline lives. This is where you can do hard things. The second state is sympathetic activation, which is your fight or flight mode. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your body prepares for action, but not the focused, deliberate action of productive work. It prepares for survival action: running, fighting, escaping. In this state, your prefrontal cortex goes partially offline. Complex thinking becomes difficult. You become reactive rather than responsive. The third state is dorsal vagal, which is your freeze or shutdown mode. This is what happens when fight or flight isn't working. Your system gives up and conserves energy. You feel tired, numb, disconnected. You can't think clearly. You can't motivate yourself. You just want to disappear. Here's the crucial insight. When you face a task that feels overwhelming, uncertain, or threatening to your sense of competence, your nervous system can interpret that as danger. Not physical danger, but danger to your status, your identity, your safety in the world. And it responds accordingly. A 2019 study from the University of Sheffield tracked physiological markers in participants as they faced tasks they had been avoiding. Heart rate increased. Cortisol spiked. Skin conductance changed. The body was responding to the avoided task as if it were a physical threat. Procrastination wasn't laziness. It was a threat response. This explains so much. It explains why you can procrastinate on something that would take 10 minutes. The task itself isn't hard, but your nervous system has coded it as threatening. Maybe because you failed at something similar before. Maybe because the outcome feels uncertain. Maybe because completing it means facing judgment. It explains why procrastination often involves escaping into low-demand activities. When your nervous system is dysregulated, it seeks regulation. Social media, television, and comfort food are all regulatory behaviors. They're attempts to soothe a nervous system that's in distress. The problem isn't the behavior itself. The problem is that you're trying to regulate without addressing the underlying activation. And it explains why willpower fails. You cannot willpower your way out of a threat state. The threat response is faster, older, and more powerful than conscious intention. Trying to force yourself to work while your nervous system is screaming danger is like trying to sprint with the parking brake on. You might move forward a little, but you're fighting your own biology. Average performers try to push through the resistance. They use guilt, shame, and self-criticism as motivators. They tell themselves to stop being lazy. They force themselves to sit at the desk and work. Sometimes this works temporarily, but the nervous system activation doesn't go away. It builds, and eventually it wins. This is why so many people oscillate between periods of forced productivity and complete collapse. Elite performers regulate first, then work. They recognize the signs of nervous system activation. They have techniques to shift their state before attempting focused effort. They don't fight their biology. They work with it. This is what we're going to build: a nervous system reset that you can use anytime you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unable to start. The key is your vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in your body, running from your brainstem through your face, throat, heart, lungs, and gut. It's the primary communication pathway between your body and your brain. And most importantly, it's bidirectional. Your brain can send signals down to regulate your body, but your body can also send signals up to regulate your brain. This is the leverage point. You can't directly control your nervous system state through thinking, but you can indirectly control it through your body. Specific physical actions send signals through the vagus nerve that tell your brain, "We're safe now. The threat is over. We can come back online." Here's a 2-minute nervous system reset that works remarkably well. It has 3 components, and you can do it anywhere, anytime you feel the resistance rising. Component 1 is physiological sighing. This is a specific breathing pattern that rapidly downregulates the sympathetic nervous system. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Then take a second, shorter breath in on top of it, really filling your lungs. Then exhale slowly through your mouth, longer than the inhale. The double inhale maximally inflates the tiny air sacs in your lungs, and the extended exhale activates the parasympathetic response. A 2023 study from Stanford's neuroscience lab, led by Andrew Huberman and David Spiegel, found that just 5 minutes of physiological sighing was more effective at reducing stress and improving mood than meditation, box breathing, or other common techniques. But even 1 or 2 cycles can shift your state noticeably. Component 2 is peripheral vision activation. When you're in a threat state, your visual field narrows. This is called tunnel vision, and it's a physiological response to perceived danger. Your brain focuses on the threat and excludes everything else. You can reverse this deliberately. Soften your gaze and expand your awareness to your peripheral vision. Without moving your eyes, notice what's at the edges of your visual field. Left and right, up and down. This simple action sends a signal to your brain. If we can afford to notice the periphery, there must not be an immediate threat. It's a safety signal. Component 3 is orienting. This is a technique from trauma therapy that grounds you in the present moment. Slowly look around the room. Not quickly, not anxiously. Slowly, let your eyes land on different objects. Name them silently. Chair, window, plant, lamp. This tells your nervous system that you're here, now, in this specific environment. Not in the imagined future where the task goes badly. Not in the remembered past where you failed. Here, put these 3 together. 2 or 3 physiological sighs, 30 seconds of peripheral vision, 30 seconds of slow orienting. The whole sequence takes about 2 minutes, and it can shift you from freeze or fight into ventral vagal, where focused work becomes possible again. Here's how to integrate this into your discipline architecture. Use the reset whenever you notice resistance, not after you've been procrastinating for an hour. At the first sign, you'll learn to recognize the feeling, the tightness in your chest, the urge to escape, the mental fog, the sudden interest in anything other than the task at hand. These are signals that your nervous system has shifted. Don't push through. Reset first. Use the reset as a transition ritual. Before starting any focused work block, do a 60-second version. This clears the residue of whatever came before and establishes the state you need for what comes next. Over time, the ritual itself becomes a cue that tells your nervous system, we're entering focus mode now. Use the reset when you're stuck mid-task. Sometimes you start working fine, and then you hit a difficult section and your system activates. You feel the urge to check your phone, get a snack, do anything but continue. This is a mid-task threat response. Don't abandon the work. Step back for 90 seconds, reset, and return. There's one more principle that makes nervous system regulation sustainable. It's about building what's called your window of tolerance. Your window of tolerance is the zone where you can experience stress without becoming dysregulated. Some people have a narrow window. Small stressors push them into fight, flight, or freeze. Others have a wide window. They can handle significant pressure while staying in their ventral vagal state. The good news is that your window of tolerance can be expanded. Every time you successfully regulate yourself and return to a calm state, you're training your nervous system. You're building capacity. The more you practice the reset, the less you'll need it. Not because stressors disappear, but because your system becomes better at handling them. This is why the daily practice matters. It's not just about getting through today's task. It's about building a nervous system that can handle bigger challenges in the future. A 2020 study from the University of Wisconsin tracked participants who practiced vagal toning exercises daily for 8 weeks. By the end of the study, their baseline heart rate variability, which is a measure of nervous system flexibility, had significantly improved. They reported feeling less reactive to stress. And importantly, they showed better performance on tasks requiring sustained focus and executive function. Your assignment for this chapter is simple but important. Practice the 2-minute reset 3 times today. Once in the morning, once before your most challenging task, once when you notice resistance arising. Don't wait until you desperately need it. Build the skill when the stakes are low so it's available when the stakes are high. Remember, you're not weak for feeling resistance. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it evolved to do. The difference is that now you have a tool to work with it instead of against it. In the next chapter, we're going to install your 6th default, micro-commitment loops. You'll learn how to build momentum through tiny daily actions that compound into unstoppable consistency. This is where small becomes powerful. Let's keep building. Chapter 8, Micro-Commitment Loops. In 1966, 2 psychologists from Stanford conducted an experiment that would become one of the most cited studies in behavioral science. Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser went door to door in a California neighborhood asking homeowners to put a large, ugly sign in their front yard that read, "Drive carefully." The sign was so big it would block the view of the house. Not surprisingly, most people said no. Only 17% agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. 2 weeks earlier, a different researcher had visited some of these same homes with a much smaller request. Would you put a tiny 3-inch sign in your window that says, "Be a safe driver"? Almost everyone said yes. It was such a small ask. When the researchers returned to these homes with the large, ugly sign, something remarkable happened. 76% said yes. The same request that got 17% compliance in the control group got 76% compliance from people who had made the small commitment first. This is the power of micro-commitments. And it's the sixth subconscious default that will transform your relationship with discipline. The researchers called this phenomenon the foot-in-the-door effect. But what they were really discovering was something deeper about how human identity and behavior interact. When you make a small commitment and follow through, your brain updates its model of who you are. You become, in your own mind, the type of person who does this kind of thing. And once that identity shift happens, larger consistent behaviors follow naturally. This is the opposite of how most people approach discipline. Most people start big. They commit to working out 5 days a week. They commit to writing 2,000 words per day. They commit to waking up at 5 a.m. every morning. These commitments feel motivating in the moment, but they're too large to build identity. When you inevitably miss a day, you don't just fail the task. You fail the identity. And that failure reinforces the old story. I'm not the type of person who follows through. Micro-commitments work differently. They're so small that failure becomes almost impossible. And because you succeed consistently, you build a chain of evidence that rewires your self-perception. You become someone who keeps promises to yourself. Not because you did something extraordinary, but because you did something small, again and again, until it became undeniable. Here's the principle. Consistency beats intensity. Every single time. A 5-minute daily practice will transform you more than an occasional 5-hour marathon session. Not because 5 minutes is enough to create change directly, but because 5 minutes is enough to create identity. And identity creates change automatically. A 2018 study from University College London tracked participants trying to build new habits. They found that the strongest predictor of long-term success wasn't the intensity of the effort. It wasn't the quality of the plan. It wasn't the level of motivation. It was the number of consecutive days the behavior was performed. Streaks mattered more than everything else. This is because your brain tracks patterns. When you do something 3 days in a row, your brain notices. When you do something 30 days in a row, your brain concludes, this is who we are now. The behavior becomes part of your operating system. It stops requiring conscious effort. Average performers set ambitious commitments that they can't sustain. They go hard for a week, miss a day, feel like failures, and quit. Their pattern is big commitment, initial enthusiasm, inevitable miss, shame spiral, abandonment. This pattern reinforces the identity of someone who doesn't follow through. Elite performers set tiny commitments that they can sustain indefinitely. They protect the streak above all else. They understand that a 5-minute workout on a hard day is infinitely more valuable than a 90-minute workout on a good day, followed by nothing for a week. The streak is the asset. The streak is what builds identity. So how do you actually build a micro-commitment loop? There are 4 components. Component 1 is the minimum viable action. This is the smallest possible version of the behavior that still counts. Not the ideal version. Not the version you do when conditions are perfect. The absolute minimum that preserves the streak. For exercise, it might be 1 push-up. For writing, it might be 1 sentence. For meditation, it might be 3 breaths. For focused work, it might be 5 minutes on your most important task. These minimums sound almost absurdly small. That's the point. The minimum must be so easy that you can do it when you're sick, when you're traveling, when you're exhausted, when everything has gone wrong. Because those are the days that matter most. Those are the days that break streaks. And broken streaks break identities. Here's a practical technique. Take whatever habit you're trying to build and ask, what's the version I could do in 2 minutes on my worst possible day? That's your minimum. That's what you commit to. Anything above that is a bonus. Component 2 is the streak tracker. Your brain needs to see the evidence accumulating. A visual record of consecutive completions creates a powerful psychological effect called loss aversion. Once you have a streak going, the pain of breaking it exceeds the discomfort of maintaining it. The streak becomes its own motivation. This can be as simple as a calendar where you mark an X each day you complete your minimum, or an app that tracks streaks, or a chain of paper clips that grows each day. The format doesn't matter. What matters is that you can see the consecutive completions building. Jerry Seinfeld famously used this technique to become a better comedian. He committed to writing jokes every single day and marked each completion on a calendar with a big red X. His only rule was, don't break the chain. The visual chain of X's became its own motivator. He didn't want to write jokes because he felt inspired. He wanted to write jokes because he didn't want to break the chain. Component 3 is the expansion protocol. Starting with minimums doesn't mean staying at minimums forever. It means building the foundation first and then expanding from a position of strength. Here's how expansion works. Once you've maintained your streak for 2 consecutive weeks without struggle, you can increase the minimum slightly. Not double it. Increase it by about 10 to 20%. If your minimum was 1 push-up, make it 3. If it was 1 sentence, make it 1 paragraph. If it was 5 minutes of focused work, make it 7. The key is to expand slowly enough that you never break the streak. If you expand and start struggling, contract back to the previous minimum. Protect the streak above all else. The identity you're building is worth more than any single session of effort. A 2021 study from the Max Planck Institute tracked habit formation across different escalation strategies. They found that gradual expansion from a tiny starting point resulted in significantly more durable habits than starting at a moderate level and trying to maintain it. The small start group had 83% adherence at 6 months. The moderate start group had only 41%. Component 4 is the recovery protocol. Despite your best efforts, streaks sometimes break. Life happens. You get sick. You travel. An emergency arises. And when the streak breaks, there's a critical moment where the whole system can collapse. Most people respond to a broken streak with despair. They think, I ruined it. Now I have to start over. What's the point? This thinking is catastrophic because it gives a single miss the power to destroy all the progress you've made. Here's the reframe that protects your investment. A broken streak doesn't erase the identity you've built. Those consecutive days of evidence still happened. They still count. A single miss is just a single miss. It's not proof that you're not disciplined. It's just one data point against hundreds. The recovery protocol is simple. Restart immediately. Not tomorrow. Not Monday. The very next available opportunity. If you miss your morning workout, do your minimum that evening. If you miss a day of writing, write 1 sentence before bed. The goal is to prevent 1 miss from becoming 2 misses. Because 2 misses become a pattern. And patterns become identity. Research from the University of Chicago found that the difference between people who recover from habit disruptions and people who don't comes down to one factor: how quickly they restart. Same habits, same disruptions, but the people who restarted within 24 hours were 90% likely to maintain the habit long term. People who waited more than 48 hours dropped to just 15%. 24 hours. That's your recovery window. Miss once, forgive yourself, restart within a day. Let me show you how micro-commitment loops work in practice across different areas. For fitness, your minimum is 2 push-ups every morning. You track it on a calendar in your bathroom. After 2 weeks of unbroken streak, you move to 5 push-ups. After another 2 weeks, you add 2 minutes of stretching. Each expansion is small. The streak never breaks. 6 months later, you have a 20-minute morning routine that feels automatic. For deep work, your minimum is 5 minutes on your most important task before checking email. You track it in a simple app. After 2 weeks, you expand to 10 minutes. Then 15. A year later, you're doing 90 minutes of focused work before any communication, and it feels normal. Not because you have superhuman discipline, but because you built it in increments small enough to never fail. For reading, your minimum is 1 page per night before sleep. You track it by moving a bookmark and noting the date. After 2 weeks, you expand to 5 pages. then 10. A year later, you've read 20 books without ever feeling like you were forcing yourself. The magic is in the accumulation. Tiny actions, repeated without fail, compound into transformative results. Not through heroic effort, through patient consistency. Your assignment for this chapter is to identify one micro-commitment you will start tomorrow. Define your minimum viable action, something you can do in 2 minutes on your worst day. Set up your streak tracker. Commit to 14 consecutive days without expansion. Just 14 days of the tiny minimum. This isn't about the direct impact of those 2-minute actions. It's about proving to yourself that you're the type of person who keeps promises to yourself. That proof is worth more than any single accomplishment. In the next chapter, we're going to install your 7th and final default, the weekly audit system. You'll learn how to maintain all the systems you've built, catch problems before they cascade, and ensure that your discipline architecture stays strong over time. We're almost at the finish line. Let's complete the system. Chapter 9, Weekly Audit System. NASA almost lost the Hubble Space Telescope because of a mirror that was 2 microns too flat. 2 microns. That's about 1/50th the width of a human hair. The most sophisticated optical instrument ever built, years in development, billions of dollars invested, and it nearly failed because of an error smaller than a speck of dust. The mirror passed hundreds of tests during manufacturing, but no one was checking for the right thing. This is what happens to systems without proper auditing. Small errors compound. Tiny deviations accumulate. And by the time the problem becomes obvious, the damage is already done. The same thing happens with your discipline architecture. You can build perfect cue design, lock in your identity, engineer friction flawlessly, manage your dopamine, regulate your nervous system, and stack micro-commitments. But without regular auditing, the system will drift. Slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you're back where you started, wondering what went wrong. This is the 7th subconscious default, the weekly audit system. It's not the most exciting part of discipline, but it's the part that makes everything else sustainable. Here's why systems decay without maintenance. Your environment changes constantly. New objects appear. Old cues get moved. Digital clutter accumulates. The carefully designed friction you created gets eroded by convenience. Your phone finds its way back to your desk. The meditation cushion gets buried under laundry. The gym bag migrates to the closet. Each change is small. Each change is imperceptible. But over weeks, your environment stops supporting your goals and starts undermining them. Your habits face constant pressure. Work demands shift. Social obligations change. Stress levels fluctuate. The minimum viable action that felt effortless in calm times becomes a burden during crisis. Streaks get threatened. Expansions stall. The micro-commitment loop that was building identity starts to feel like another obligation. Your neurochemistry adapts. The dopamine management strategies that worked initially become less effective as your brain adjusts. New sources of cheap stimulation find their way in. The morning protection ritual gets shorter. The reward scheduling gets sloppy. Your baseline starts dropping again. None of these changes announce themselves. There's no alarm that goes off when your system is degrading. It happens gradually, silently, until the cumulative drift becomes catastrophic failure. A 2017 study from the London School of Economics tracked organizational performance after major improvement initiatives. They found that 89% of the gains from any improvement effort were lost within 2 years. Not because the improvements didn't work, but because there was no system for maintaining them. The organizations improved, then drifted, then wondered why they were back to baseline. The same pattern plays out in individual behavior change. You make progress. You feel good. You assume the progress is permanent. You stop paying attention. The drift begins. Average performers build systems and hope they stick. They create elaborate plans, implement them with enthusiasm, and then move on to the next thing. When the system fails, they blame themselves. They think they lack discipline. In reality, they lack maintenance. Elite performers build systems and audit them relentlessly. They know that entropy is the default. They know that everything trends toward disorder without active intervention. So they schedule regular check-ins to catch drift early before it becomes disaster. The weekly audit is your intervention against entropy. It takes about 15 minutes, once per week, and it protects everything you've built. Here's exactly how to do it. The audit has 3 phases: review, diagnose, and adjust. Phase 1 is the review. You systematically check each of the 7 defaults against your current reality. Not how you think things are going, how they're actually going. For cue architecture, ask, have any negative cues crept back into my environment? Are my positive cues still prominent? Have any friction barriers been eroded? Walk through your physical and digital spaces with fresh eyes. Notice what's changed since you last audited. For identity lock, ask, am I still operating from my target identity? What evidence did I generate this week? Did I catch myself using language that conflicts with who I'm becoming? Review your daily proofs. Are they happening consistently? For friction design, ask, is the path of least resistance still leading to the right behaviors? Have I unconsciously reduced friction for bad behaviors? Have I allowed friction to increase for good behaviors? Check your apps, your environment, your routines. For dopamine budget, ask, how is my morning protection holding up? Did I allow cheap dopamine to creep in before meaningful work? Am I still pairing effort with reward correctly? Did I create any strategic deficits this week? For nervous system reset, ask, did I use the reset when I needed it? Did I notice resistance signals early, or did I push through until dysregulation? How is my window of tolerance? Am I more or less reactive than last week? For micro-commitment loops, ask, are my streaks intact? Did I maintain my minimums every day? Am I ready to expand any habits? Did I have any misses? And if so, did I recover within 24 hours? For the weekly audit itself, ask, am I actually doing this audit? When did I last do one? Is it scheduled as a recurring commitment? Phase 2 is the diagnosis. Based on your review, identify where the system is working and where it's drifting. Be honest here. The audit only works if you tell yourself the truth. If you skipped 3 days of your micro-commitment and pretended you didn't, the audit can't help you. If your phone has been on your desk all week and you rationalize that it's fine, the audit can't help you. Look for patterns. Is the same default failing repeatedly? That suggests a structural problem that needs redesign, not just recommitment. Is everything failing at once? That suggests a larger life disruption that needs to be addressed before the systems can work. Most weeks, you'll find small drifts. A cue that moved, a friction barrier that eroded, a dopamine leak that opened up. These are normal. Catching them weekly means they never accumulate into system failure. Occasionally, you'll find larger problems. A fundamental flaw in your design. A life change that makes your current system obsolete. A mental or emotional challenge that's disrupting everything. These require more significant intervention. Phase 3 is the adjustment. Based on your diagnosis, make specific changes before the next week begins. For small drifts, the adjustment is usually simple. Put the phone back in the other room. Recommit to the morning dopamine fast. Restart the broken streak. Move the book back to the pillow. These take minutes. For larger problems, the adjustment might require redesigning part of the system. Maybe your minimum viable action needs to shrink because life has gotten harder. Maybe your queue architecture needs to change because you moved to a new workspace. Maybe your identity statement needs to evolve because you've grown past it. The key is to make adjustments immediately, not next week, not when you feel ready, during the audit itself. If you identify that your phone has drifted back to your desk, physically move it before you finish the audit. If you identify that your streak has broken, do your minimum before you close the session. A 2019 study from Harvard Business School found that teams who conducted weekly reviews and made immediate adjustments outperformed teams who reviewed quarterly by 300%. Same goals, same resources, but the weekly rhythm caught problems while they were still small and correctable. Here's a specific structure for your weekly audit. Schedule it for the same time each week. Sunday evening works well for most people because it allows you to prepare for the week ahead. But any consistent time works. Use this checklist. Read through it systematically. Don't skip items because you assume they're fine. Cue architecture. Walk through your primary spaces. Identify any negative cues that have appeared. Confirm positive cues are still prominent. Verify friction barriers are intact. Make one physical adjustment if needed. Identity lock. Recite your identity statement. Review this week's daily proofs. Note any conflicting language you used. Confirm the statement still fits who you're becoming. Friction design. Check app placements on your phone. Verify environmental barriers are in place. Assess if right behaviors are still easiest. Make one friction adjustment if needed. Dopamine budget. Evaluate morning protection compliance. Review cheap versus deep dopamine ratio. Assess reward scheduling accuracy. Plan one strategic deficit for next week. Nervous system reset. Count how many times you used the reset. Assess if you caught resistance early. Rate your overall regulation this week. Practice the reset once during the audit. Micro-commitment loops. Check all active streaks. Confirm minimums were met daily. Assess readiness for expansion. If any streak broke, restart now. System health. Rate overall system performance from 1 to 10. Identify the weakest default this week. Identify the strongest default this week. Set one focus area for improvement next week. The entire checklist takes about 15 minutes. 15 minutes to protect hours of productive capacity. 15 minutes to prevent weeks of rebuilding from failure. There's one more element that makes the audit sustainable, treating it as its own micro-commitment. The audit is a behavior like any other. It needs a cue, a minimum viable action, and a streak to protect. Schedule it at the same time each week so the time itself becomes the cue. Define a minimum version, maybe just reviewing the checklist even if you don't have time for deep diagnosis. Track your audit streak so that skipping feels like breaking a chain. If you audit yourself consistently for 3 months, the habit becomes automatic. You'll feel uncomfortable if you skip it. The system will maintain itself. Average performers build systems and let them decay. They experience the initial gains, assume permanence, and watch helplessly as entropy erodes their progress. Elite performers build systems and audit them weekly. They catch drift before it becomes disaster. They adjust continuously. They treat maintenance as part of the discipline, not separate from it. The Hubble telescope was eventually fixed. Astronauts installed corrective optics that compensated for the flawed mirror. The telescope went on to revolutionize our understanding of the universe. But the fix only happened because someone was paying attention. Someone was auditing. Someone caught the problem and designed a solution. Your discipline architecture is the same. It's sophisticated, it's powerful, and it requires attention to reach its potential. Your assignment for this chapter is to schedule your first weekly audit. Put it in your calendar right now. Choose a consistent time that you can protect every week. Complete your first audit using the checklist. Then treat the audit itself as a streak you'll never break. In the final chapter, we're going to bring everything together. You'll see how all 7 defaults integrate into a complete discipline architecture. You'll get a daily and weekly execution template, and you'll understand exactly how to use this system for any goal, any area of life, starting tomorrow. This is where everything becomes one. Chapter 10, The Discipline Architecture. On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced that America would land a man on the moon before the decade was out. At the time, the United States had accumulated a total of 15 minutes of human spaceflight. 15 minutes. And Kennedy was promising to send astronauts 240,000 miles into space, land them on another world, and bring them home safely. Most experts thought it was impossible. 8 years later, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface. Not because NASA had astronauts with superhuman willpower, not because Americans were more motivated than anyone else, but because they built a system, an architecture of thousands of interlocking processes, each one designed to move the mission forward without requiring heroic individual effort. The architecture made the impossible inevitable. This is what you've built across the last 9 chapters. Not a collection of tips, not a set of tricks to try when you feel inspired. You've built a discipline architecture, a system of 7 interlocking defaults that work together to make consistent action automatic. Let's see the complete system. Default 1 is queue architecture. You've learned that your environment is not neutral. Every object, every app, every notification is either pulling you toward your goals or away from them. You've redesigned your physical and digital spaces so that the cues around you trigger focus instead of distraction. You've removed negative cues, amplified positive cues, and created dedicated activation spaces. Your environment now works for you instead of against you. Default 2 is identity lock. You've learned that behavior flows from identity, not from goals. You've defined who you're becoming with a specific identity statement. You've built a proof loop that generates daily evidence for that identity. And you've experienced how the lock mechanism makes discipline feel natural once enough evidence accumulates. You're no longer trying to act disciplined. You're becoming someone who is disciplined. Default 3 is friction design. You've learned that your brain always chooses the path of least resistance. Instead of fighting this tendency, you've harnessed it. You've added barrier friction to behaviors you want to reduce. You've removed runway friction from behaviors you want to increase. You've used the 20-second rule in both directions. The right choice is now literally easier than the wrong choice. Default 4 is dopamine budget. You've learned that your motivation system can be depleted by cheap stimulation or protected for meaningful work. You've implemented morning dopamine fasting to protect your baseline. You've categorized your rewards into cheap and deep. You've created strategic deficits to reset your sensitivity. And you've learned to pair effort with reward so that discipline becomes pleasurable. Default 5 is nervous system reset. You've learned that procrastination is often a threat response, not a character flaw. You've mastered the 2-minute reset with physiological sighing, peripheral vision activation, and orienting. You can now shift from freeze or fight into the ventral vagal state, where focused work is possible. You've started building your window of tolerance so that future stressors affect you less. Default 6 is micro-commitment loops. You've learned that consistency beats intensity every time. You've defined minimum viable actions so small that failure is nearly impossible. You've started tracking streaks to leverage loss aversion. You understand the expansion protocol for gradual growth and the recovery protocol for bouncing back from breaks. Your identity is being built one small proof at a time. Default 7 is the weekly audit system. You've learned that all systems decay without maintenance. You've scheduled a 15-minute weekly review to catch drift before it becomes disaster. You use the 3-phase process of review, diagnose, and adjust. You treat the audit itself as a streak to protect. Your system now has a maintenance protocol that keeps it running indefinitely. These 7 defaults don't operate in isolation. They reinforce each other. Cue architecture makes identity lock easier because your environment keeps reminding you who you're becoming. Identity lock makes friction design more effective because you naturally arrange things to match your self-image. Dopamine budget makes micro-commitments more sustainable because you have the motivational energy to maintain them. Nervous system reset makes everything possible because you can regulate yourself when challenges arise. And the weekly audit keeps all 6 defaults functioning properly. This is architecture. This is how you build discipline that lasts. Now let me give you the execution templates that turn this architecture into daily and weekly practice. Your daily template has 3 phases: morning activation, work execution, and evening preparation. Morning activation takes about 15 minutes and sets up your entire day. You wake up and protect the first 90 minutes from high dopamine input. No phone checking, no email, no social media. During this protected time, you complete your daily proof, your minimum viable action that generates identity evidence. You do your nervous system reset to establish a regulated baseline. And you review your one most important task for the day so your brain knows where to direct focus. Work execution happens throughout your productive hours. Before each focus block, you do a 60-second version of the nervous system reset to transition into the work state. During the focus block, you rely on your cue architecture and friction design to minimize distraction. If you notice resistance rising, you pause for a full 2-minute reset rather than pushing through into dysregulation. You save high dopamine rewards for after completing meaningful work, never before or during. Evening preparation takes about 10 minutes and sets up tomorrow's success. You do an environment scan to ensure your cue architecture is intact. You lay out anything needed for tomorrow's morning activation. You move your phone to its overnight location away from your bedroom. You do one final nervous system regulation practice to ensure quality sleep. This daily template doesn't require massive time investment. 15 minutes in the morning. Brief resets throughout the day. 10 minutes in the evening. The discipline happens in the structure, not in the effort. Your weekly template centers on the Sunday audit. 15 minutes to review all 7 defaults against your current reality. Diagnose where the system is working and where it's drifting. Make immediate adjustments before the new week begins. Plan any strategic dopamine deficits for the coming week. Assess whether any micro-commitment minimums need to shrink or expand. The weekly template also includes a monthly expansion review. Once per month, look at your micro-commitment loops and assess which habits are ready for their next expansion. Review your identity statement and assess whether it still captures who you're becoming. Evaluate whether your cue architecture needs significant redesign based on life changes. This architecture works for any goal. Let me show you how to apply it. For fitness goals, your cue architecture means workout clothes visible, gym bag by the door, exercise app on your home screen. Your identity statement might be, I am the type of person who moves my body daily. Your friction design means the workout requires fewer steps to start than the excuses required to justify. Your dopamine budget means no social media before the workout, with entertainment saved for post-exercise reward. Your micro-commitment minimum might be 2 minutes of movement, expandable as the streak grows. For career goals, your cue architecture means your most important project is open when you sit down, distractions blocked, phone in another room. Your identity statement might be, I am the type of person who does deep work before shallow work. Your friction design means email and chat require deliberate effort to access. Your dopamine budget means protecting your peak cognitive hours from cheap stimulation. Your micro-commitment minimum might be 15 minutes of focused work on your highest priority task. For relationship goals, your cue architecture means reminders for connection visible, phone away during quality time, environment designed for presence. Your identity statement might be, I am the type of person who prioritizes the people I love. Your friction design means distractions are hard to access during dedicated relationship time. Your micro-commitment minimum might be one genuine question asked to your partner or one message sent to a friend you're nurturing. The architecture is universal. The specific implementation adapts to whatever matters to you. Now I want to address something important as we close. You're going to face resistance to implementing this system. Not from the outside, from within. There's a part of you that has an investment in the old way. The part that believes you need more motivation. The part that thinks discipline should feel hard. The part that suspects any system this structured will be too rigid, too demanding, too much. That resistance is normal. It's your brain protecting the familiar, even when the familiar isn't working. Don't fight the resistance. Expect it. Notice it when it arises. Do your nervous system reset. And take the next smallest action anyway. You're also going to face imperfect implementation. You won't do all 7 defaults perfectly from day one. You'll forget the morning dopamine fast sometimes. You'll skip the weekly audit occasionally. You'll break streaks despite your best intentions. This is not failure. This is the process. Remember the identity shift. You're not trying to be a disciplined person. You're becoming one. Becoming implies a journey. It implies imperfection along the way. Every attempt, every struggle, every recovery from a slip is evidence of who you're becoming. The only way to fail is to stop. A 2020 meta-analysis from the University of British Columbia reviewed over 200 studies on behavior change. They found that the single strongest predictor of long-term success wasn't the quality of the initial plan. It wasn't the intensity of the initial effort. It wasn't personality, intelligence, or resources. The strongest predictor was persistence through early failures. People who kept going after setbacks succeeded. People who interpreted setbacks as proof of inability failed. You have everything you need. The system is complete. The architecture is built. What remains is execution. One day at a time. One minimum viable action at a time. One proof at a time. You started this audiobook believing that discipline was something you lacked. Something others had and you didn't. something you needed to find or summon or force. Now you know the truth. Discipline isn't a character trait. It's installed software. It's a system of defaults that run automatically once they're properly designed. You don't need more willpower. You need better architecture. And now you have it. The person you were when you started this audiobook is not the person you are now. You've gained knowledge that most people never encounter. You understand how your brain actually works. You have 7 specific defaults you can install immediately. You have daily and weekly templates to execute. You have everything you need to become the person who follows through. 1 year from today, you'll look back on this moment. The version of you that exists then will either be grateful that you started or wishing you had. The future is not determined by your intentions. It's determined by your systems. Your system is ready. Start tomorrow. Start with 1 default. Cue architecture is usually the easiest entry point. Make 3 physical changes to your environment before you go to sleep tonight. Remove 1 negative cue. Reduce friction for 1 positive behavior. Place 1 positive cue where you'll encounter it first thing in the morning. Then add the 2nd default. Define your identity statement. Start your proof loop. Build incrementally. Audit weekly. Adjust continuously. Trust the architecture. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You don't need perfect conditions or the right moment or a fresh start on Monday. You need to begin. The architecture is built. The system is complete. The only thing remaining is you, deciding that today is the day your future changes. Make the decision, then let the system do the rest. Bonus chapter: the 7-day discipline launch protocol. You have the architecture. You understand the system. Now you need a launch pad. The next 7 days will determine whether this audiobook becomes another piece of consumed content or the turning point that actually changes your life. Most people finish a book like this feeling inspired. They tell themselves they'll implement everything soon. Then life happens. The inspiration fades. The knowledge sits unused. 3 months later, they're searching for another book, another system, another answer to the same problem. You're going to do something different. You're going to install 1 default per day for 7 days. By the end of the week, your complete discipline architecture will be operational. Not theoretically understood, actually running. Here's your exact protocol. Day 1. Cue architecture foundation. Today is about your environment. Nothing else. Don't try to change your habits yet. Don't try to be more disciplined. Just redesign the cues around you. Your morning task. Walk through your primary workspace. Identify 3 negative cues that trigger distraction or avoidance. Remove them completely if possible. If not, hide them or add friction. Move your phone to another room. Close unnecessary browser tabs. Clear visual clutter from your desk. Your evening task. Place 3 positive cues for tomorrow. Put a book on your pillow. Lay out workout clothes. Open the document you need to work on. Set up your environment so that tomorrow morning, the right behaviors are the path of least resistance. Time required, 20 minutes total. That's it. 1 focused environmental redesign session. Before bed, take a photo of your redesigned workspace. This is your baseline. You'll compare against it during your weekly audit. Day 2, identity lock activation. Today you define who you're becoming. This is the foundation that everything else builds on. Your morning task. Complete this sentence in writing. I am the type of person who. Choose 1 statement that captures the disciplined identity you're building. Make it specific. Make it behavioral. Write it on a card and place it where you'll see it daily. Your daily proof. Identify 1 small action that proves this identity. Something you can do in under 5 minutes. Something so easy you could do it on your worst day. This becomes your daily proof starting today. Execute your first proof before noon. After completing it, pause for 3 seconds and consciously register. This is evidence. This is who I am. Your evening task. Review your identity statement. Does it still feel right? Adjust if needed. Then prepare tomorrow's proof. Know exactly what you'll do and when. Time required, 15 minutes for setup, 5 minutes for the daily proof. This investment protects everything else. Day 3, friction design implementation. Today you tilt the playing field. You make the right choice easier than the wrong choice. Your morning task. Identify your single biggest friction problem. What behavior do you want to stop that's currently too easy? Add 3 layers of friction to it. If it's social media, delete the apps, log out on browser, and use a blocking extension. Stack the barriers. Your midday task. Identify one positive behavior that has too much friction. What do you want to do more of, but keep skipping? Remove 3 obstacles. If it's exercise, put equipment visible, have clothes ready, have the workout planned. Clear the runway. Your evening task. Test your friction design. Try to do the behavior you added barriers to. Notice how the friction creates decision points. Then try to start the behavior you cleared friction from. Notice how easily it begins. Time required. 30 minutes of redesign. The payoff lasts indefinitely. Day 4. Dopamine budget setup. Today you protect your motivational energy. This is where most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. Your morning task. Implement the 90-minute morning protection protocol. From the moment you wake up, no phone checking, no email, no social media, no news for 90 minutes. Use this time for your daily proof and your most important work. Your midday task. Categorize your rewards. Make 2 lists: cheap dopamine sources and deep dopamine sources. Be honest about which activities give quick hits versus genuine satisfaction. Your evening task. Design tomorrow's reward schedule. Identify when you'll allow cheap dopamine and make it contingent on completing meaningful work first. No entertainment until you've done your deep work block. This is the rule. Time required. The morning protection costs nothing. It just requires not doing things. The categorization takes 10 minutes. Day 5. Nervous system reset mastery. Today you learn to regulate yourself so that procrastination loses its grip. Your morning task. Practice the full 2-minute reset 3 times before noon. Physiological sighing. Double inhale through nose. Long exhale through mouth. Peripheral vision. Soften gaze. Notice the edges. Orienting. Slowly scan the room. Name objects. Get comfortable with the sequence. Your midday task. Notice when resistance arises. Don't try to push through it. Instead, pause and do the reset. See what happens to the resistance after you regulate. Most of the time, it dissolves. Your evening task. Practice the 60-second version that you'll use as a transition ritual before focus blocks. This shorter version will become automatic with repetition. Time required. 10 minutes of practice distributed through the day. This skill pays dividends for life. Day 6. Micro-commitment launch. Today you start the streak that builds your identity over time. Your morning task. Define your minimum viable action for the habit that matters most to you. Remember, this is the version you can do on your worst day. 2 minutes maximum. So small that failure is almost impossible. Your tracking task. Set up your streak tracker. A calendar with X marks. An app. A chain of paper clips. The format doesn't matter. The visibility does. Put it where you'll see it daily. Your execution task. Complete your minimum viable action today. Mark your first completion. 1 down. This is day 1 of a streak you'll protect fiercely. Your evening task. Prepare tomorrow's minimum. Know exactly what you'll do and when. Eliminate any uncertainty. Time required. 5 minutes to define. 2 minutes to execute. The streak will compound into transformation. Day 7. Weekly audit installation. Your morning task. Schedule your weekly audit. Choose a consistent time that you can protect every week. Put it in your calendar as a recurring event. Treat it as non-negotiable. Your midday task. Review all 6 defaults you've installed this week. Queue architecture, still intact? Identity lock, daily proofs happening? Friction design, barriers holding? Dopamine budget, morning protected? Nervous system, resets being used? Micro commitments, streak unbroken? Your afternoon task. Conduct your first full weekly audit using the checklist from Chapter 9. Notice what's drifting. Make adjustments. Your evening task. Celebrate. Not with cheap dopamine. With recognition. You've built a complete discipline architecture in 7 days. After day 7, the maintenance phase. Your system is now operational. From here, the protocol shifts. Daily, you'll execute. Morning dopamine protection, daily proof, nervous system resets as needed, minimum viable actions for your streaks. Weekly, you'll audit. 15 minutes to review all 7 defaults. diagnose drift, and adjust immediately. The system runs itself once installed. Your job is to maintain it through the weekly audit and trust the architecture to produce results. One final note. These 7 days will feel different from anything you've tried before. You're not relying on motivation. You're not white-knuckling through resistance. You're systematically installing defaults that make discipline automatic. Some will be harder. The installation does. 7 days of focused implementation, and you'll have something most people spend their entire lives searching for. A discipline architecture that actually works. Day 1 starts tomorrow morning. Set your alarm. Remove your phone from your bedroom tonight. And when you wake up, begin with Q architecture.